Morning, I was up at 4. Yeah, that happens a lot, but especially when I'm about to preach. And when I went back to bed, my husband Benjamin reached out with his hand and said, "You don't have to do anything. You don't have to do anything. You just have to be." I'm going to invite you right now. You don't have to do anything. You just have to be right here and hear this story. I'm a storyteller at heart, so this is a story today. I titled it Fullness for Your Longing, a.k.a. The Woman at the Well, Part 2, a.k.a. The River in the Middle of the Tabernacle, a.k.a. the one I like least, the title I like least, The Woman Caught in Adultery. That's a really hard sentence to say. So, when I was a little kid, I remember having the flu, the stomach flu, and my mom had learned at the time, that what went around then, I don't know if it is now, I don't know what the current thinking is you don't drink water when you're having the flu. And she left, I don't know if she left the house for some reason or what, but I remember I was so thirsty that I went into the bathroom and I turned on the faucet and I put my head under it and I just went for like as long as I could. And I drank and drank and drank and drank water. And I don't remember if I threw up after that or not, but I remember that feeling of just being so dry and wanting to have water, not the soda. She would bring, back then your mom would bring, you may not remember this, like a flat soda and set it next to your bed. That's why I hate Sprite now. But yeah, I didn't want soda. I didn't want any more flat soda. I wanted water. And this is important, the distinction in the Bible between living water and not living water. And living water is kind of like what's in the faucet. It's running, it's moving. And I wanted moving water. So today, we're going to enter into that story, part 2. This story was not, if you look in your Bible, this story was not in early manuscripts of John. Not until 400 years after, they think, or they say, which is not that long, actually, after the time of Jesus. I mean, it's only 4 generations. And what that tells me is that people were telling this story in their communities because they loved it. Some people think that John wrote it and it got put in later. Some people thought someone else wrote it. But what is clear to me is that when it got put where it got put, it belongs here. It belongs here in the place it is in John. It couldn't be a more perfect fit. Makes me think John must have written it. It's a story that has been dear to my heart for a long time. When I was studying to get ready, I always read rabbis and what they think of these stories. Find it fascinating. Christian ones and non-Christian ones. And one of them that was non-Christian, he said, Christians love this story. I'm just putting the eye roll in there because it sounded like that's how he said it. Like, it's kind of like, that's kind of like crack for them, and I was like, yes, it is. Yes, we love this story. And I was thinking about that during the song, Come Thou Long Expected Jesus. The reason I love this story is because there's no one more compelling to me than Christ. And I hope at the end of this story, you might say that too. So, I wanted to tell you one other thing about water. I almost forgot, and I just want to say it because it's one of the cutest things ever. When Bo was little, my son, he was trying to make up superhero names because I didn't let him watch Batman. And he named himself Water Strength. Now, he was a kiddo who, when he was stressed, he wanted nothing more than to get in the bath and just be in the water. And so it made all the sense in the world that he picked the name Water Strength. And so at the end of this, I also hope that you are able to say, I am Water Strength. Okay, so the story, let's get into it. We're going to read it together. And we're going to go back before the part that got added in. We're going to go to chapter 7, and there's a celebration happening, the Feast of the Tabernacles. And right smack dab in the middle of the Feast of the Tabernacles, which actually during the feast, they were celebrating water, living water, Jesus stood up. So on the last day of the feast, the great day, Jesus stood up and cried out, "If anyone thirsts, let him come to me and drink. Whoever believes in me, as the scripture has said, out of his heart will flow rivers of living water." Now this he said about the Spirit, whom those who believed in him were to receive, for as yet the Spirit had not been given, because Jesus was not yet glorified. And when they heard these words, some of the people said, "This really is a prophet." Others said, "This is the Christ." But some said, "Is the Christ supposed to come from Galilee? Has not the scripture said that the Christ comes from the offspring of David and comes from Bethlehem, the village where David was?" Some of them wanted to arrest him, but no one laid hands on him. The officers then came to the chief priests and Pharisees, who said to them, "Why did you not bring him?" And the officers answered, "No one ever spoke like this man." And the Pharisees answered them, "Have you been deceived? Have any of the authorities or the Pharisees believed in him?" In other words, do you see us believing in him? But the crowd does not know the law is accursed. Nicodemus, who had gone to him before, and who was one of them, said to them, "Does our law judge a man without first giving him a hearing and learning what he does?" And they replied, "Are you from Galilee too? Search and see that no prophet arises from Galilee." And then it says the earliest manuscripts do not include this next part. So they each went to his own house. And now for the story that found its way to the exact right place it belonged. Ready to hear it? But Jesus went to the Mount of Olives. Early in the morning, he came again to the temple. All the people came to him, and he sat down and taught them. The scribes and the Pharisees brought a woman who had been caught in adultery, and placing her in their midst, they said to him, "Teacher, this woman has been caught in the act of adultery. Now, in the law, Moses commanded us to stone such a woman," or such women, actually. "So what do you say?" This they said to test him, that they might have some charge to bring against him. And Jesus bent down and wrote with his finger on the ground. And they continued to ask him, and he stood up and said to them, "Let him who is without sin among you be the first to throw a stone at her." And once more he bent down and wrote on the ground. But when they heard it, they went away one by one, beginning with the older ones. And Jesus was left alone with the woman standing before him. And Jesus stood up and said to her, "Woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you?" And she said, "No one, Lord." And he said, "Neither do I condemn you. Go and sin no more." So, okay, we're done. That's kind of how I feel. I can go take a nap. No, just kidding. This story, oh man, my whole life, this story has been important to me. And it's a part of why I love his appearing so much. Sometimes. We'll talk about that in a minute. But I want to start first and talk about, we're going to do something kind of interesting in this story. We're going to look at all these people from inside of us. So we've got characters. We've got a Pharisee, or a group of them, and we've got the woman, and we've got Jesus. And one of the things that I love in Jungian psychology is this idea, Jung had this idea that when you come to a story, every character in the story is inside of you. And it's a really wonderful way to kind of approach the story. And I also in my therapy do a lot of work with people on something called parts of us, parts that feel one way towards the other parts. And we're gonna get a little bit into that with this story. And I think it's important because I think it's important for us to see them all in us. And the first place I want to start with that is not in the story per se, specifically, but I want to talk about the exile. I want to talk about all of them on the stage and how they were children of Israel. And Israel, the children of Israel, had been through horrors one can only imagine. Not can only imagine, we know about them. Their country had been taken over many times. Many of them had been exiled. Their places of worship had been defiled by some of these conquering people that came in. They were mistreated. They were heavily taxed. They were heavily burdened. And when we find ourselves in exile, there's this pain from early on in our life. We all have them. And really quickly, lies about the world and about us and about God attach themselves to that exile, like burdens that they carry. And from those burdens come a lot of different behaviors designed to keep us safe from ever experiencing anything like that again. And one of the first things that I want to talk about that happens is the part of us that's the Pharisee. You might be like, no, I'm not a Pharisee. Have you ever heard the saying that 90% of people believe they are the best drivers? Have you ever heard that statement? Yeah, right. That's one of my favorites. And of course, I am in that category. No, actually, I was talking to Lila one time about the dishes, and I said, do you know, every one of you comes to me and complains about how the other people do the dishes in the family, the other kids. And every one of you thinks you do it right. And she said, well, I suppose you think you do it right. And I said, well, yeah. So anyway, the Pharisees, I would say 90% of us think we're not the Pharisees. I sure didn't. All my life, when I heard this story, I am fairly confident saying I hated them. They were the villains. And it's really easy to come to that because they dragged a woman out and threw her on the ground. Because a few verses ago, Jesus said, I have the living water. And the way he said it and the time he said it in, he was saying, I am the Messiah. They were mad. They did not want him to be the Messiah. And so they dragged a woman into this, and they threw her in front of him, and they used her to capture Jesus. And I remember being so disgusted by that, so outraged. But as I've been growing and coming here to church, actually, for so many years, the narrative began to shift for me in two ways. One, in this belief that as we talk about Jesus loving all so deeply and saving all, that they're included. And then second, I began to see the ways that I have the Pharisee in me. And I do. So the Pharisee is a management system inside of us. It's trying to manage this life. It's trying to make life so that I think the heart of all of these parts of us are never again. I don't ever want to feel that way again. And I don't want to feel what that feeling feels like from then. I don't want to grieve. I don't want to look at what's in me. I don't want to feel it. And so that part begins to manage all of life, that Pharisee. He begins to say, I'm all about the rules. I'm going to get it right. And the Pharisees, for sure, they were so dedicated to the Torah, the law, and what came before, that they believed that when the Messiah came, he was going to cut down their enemies, and he was going to set them up in a ruling class, and he would bring Torah law. to the world, and that was the good for them. And Jesus brought that up. He's fulfilling that law, but it's a little different than how they saw it. And they began to see the law as something they could use to protect themselves. If I can do it right, if I can be the best. Do you hear some of these things inside of you? If I'm in the group that thinks rightly about the world, and they don't. I am good. I can follow the rules better than anyone. I can make myself great. And it's not bad to do the good things. It's not wrong to do them. But when we're doing them to keep ourselves safe, to protect our own power in this world, to protect ourselves, to push others away, they become not great. I have a lot of mercy for this because it's in me. This if I can get this right, even preparing a sermon, if I can get this right, if I can say the right things, if I can know exactly what sin means and communicate it to you just right, I will have done it. I will have been, yes. Oh. That's a part of what kept me up all night, perhaps. I don't know. That's why my husband said to me, you don't have to do anything. You just have to be. It's really hard to be. The Pharisees were absolutely rejecting Jesus. And I want you to hear that they were rejecting love. They were rejecting love. I have so much compassion in my heart for that. When I think about it, that it's in me, and I see it in people around me. You know, it's interesting in doing counseling. A lot of times I'll have clients who come in who are doing all the right things. They are meditating intensely. They are doing yoga. They're doing all the tools and the things we tell everyone to do to feel better. And they're like, Angie, why can't I wake up in the morning? Why can't I get out of bed? And I say, because those are just the things we do. They're not in that place of being. Now, it's not wrong to do yoga. It's not wrong to try to take on the tools that help us to regulate. That's important. But until we sit with who we are, with that exile inside of us, those things are just, what is it Paul says, clanging gongs and cymbals. There's no love there. So Jesus was really, really, really amazing in this scene because he bends down to write in the ground. He says to them, he sees the woman and he sees them and he bends down to write and he says to them, he stands up and says, so if there's anyone among you who's never sinned, feel free to cast the first stone. And then he bends back down and writes again. And this is the part that excites me so much about why this story is in the right place. So one of the men that I was reading some of his blog posts about this story, actually Brad Jersick, he's spoken here before, he brought up a verse in Jeremiah. And I want you to hear this. It's going to make the hair on your neck stand up just a little bit. It says in Jeremiah 17:13, those who turn away from you shall be written in the earth, for they have forsaken the Lord, the fountain of living water. Whoa. They turned away from the fountain of living water, and he wrote their name in the dust. And when he said, if anyone has no sin among you, you can cast the first stone. One by one, from the oldest to the youngest, they knew they had been caught, and so they had to drop the stone. Their trap didn't work. Later in the chapter, it's kind of interesting to note that they came back to try and stone Jesus instead of the woman. It's interesting to note that stoning was a punishment for adultery, but also for blasphemy. And they were wanting to kill him, they were saying he's committing the sin of blasphemy. So that's heavy. So we're going to come back to Jesus. We're going to go now to the woman. The woman who inspired the title, Fullness for Your Longing. So this woman, she is trying to get away from her feelings in a different way. We don't know what happened. We don't know how it says they caught her in the act. That sounds horrible in and of itself, that they saw her and they brought her here. We don't know. We know that they didn't bring the man. It was just her. So many women throughout history have been used this way and stoned. I was looking even, I think as late as like 2016, a woman was stoned by the Taliban. It's still done in parts of the world. And there's not a type of execution it's not a great type of execution, but it's a horrible execution. It's horrible just to think of how you die from it, but also the fact that people are throwing things at you. There's hatred and derision, all for how you chose to fill this longing in your heart. So she came with this longing to have love. But she also was working to push it away, because when you meet love, you end up meeting yourself. You end up meeting the things that are pushed deep down and away inside of you, where the lies about you and about God are. And we can imagine, and because of the nature of what she was brought for, that she had put her longings there. And or maybe put them away and went there to try and fill the void or fill the feeling that she had. And Jesus, he looks up at her from the ground. I almost bumped into the thing. There's not enough space up here to do a play. He looks up at her and he raises her up and he says, in one writing, there were some writings put down before this entered the manuscript. And one of the authors that wrote this story down said he said to her, daughter. And that always really struck me as this was an affectionate moment. And he said to her, does anyone condemn you? And she looked around and she said, no, Lord. And he said, neither do I condemn you. Go and sin no more. And in staff meeting, someone asked, what does he mean by that? Because don't do this again kind of thing? Like, was that what he was saying? And I was thinking about it, and I was thinking that what that means, and we talk about this a lot here, is really just believe me. Believe my love. Believe the gospel. Go and believe me. And be filled by the living water, by this love. So, when she looks into the eyes of Jesus, she sees love looking back at her. What's interesting is, I believe that love was looking over here too. And it doesn't feel like it sometimes when Jesus talks about the Pharisees. But I want to tell you a little bit about that. And Peter, I was thinking about this week. And I was remembering a time when we were talking about the prodigal son in staff meeting. And I remember hearing the story of the older brother who he was like, why aren't you having a party for me? I didn't do anything wrong. I didn't ask for your inheritance and wish you were dead. I was still here working the fields. Why isn't there a party for me? And I remember hearing that story, and I asked you, I said, what happens to the older brother? I've never asked that question before. I always thought, well, he got what was coming to him. He didn't get a party. And I said, what happens to the older brother? And Peter said, he goes into the outer darkness. And then he took a breath, and then he said, and Jesus goes there with him. to the outer darkness. And I was undone by that. In fact, I remember it still so clearly. There's not a part of us that's out of the reach of this loving movement of God to fill us. And he will wait there. And I don't know if you remember, the first time I got to preach here, I talked about the mothering heart of God. And one of the most important concepts to me is this idea that the presence, when he is with us, really truly with us, with that part of us, with that pain, it makes a shift. And that's what I believe happens for this man, for these men. He waits, he's there, he's present until they're ready to see him. We know it happened because there was a guy named Paul. Paul was killing Christians. Paul had gone so far in his hatred and his unwillingness to let love come to him that he was riding somewhere to go and, part of his killing of Christians thing that he did. And sounds weird. Sounds kind of like I'm making it lighthearted. It was not lighthearted. But he's riding on the road, and God comes and asks, "Why are you persecuting me?" And he strikes Paul with blindness, which does kind of remind me of John, where he talks about the blind man who is being healed and how Jesus said to the Pharisees, you believe you can see, but you are blind. And Paul was blinded, and he came to realize who Jesus was, and he let the love in, and he was changed, he was transformed, and he became Paul. He was Saul before, and he began to tell other people about this love. And oh my gosh, the people in the margins, the people who were left out of the story, the Gentiles. And that became his heart, was for those who were on the ground, bent down, and those in the margins. So, I just want to make sure I didn't forget something. Yeah. So, I brought my marbles back. We had one week I had these here, and we did a sermon, and I thought I'm going to bring them back. So you need to know this. Some of you don't remember, and I apologize if all of you remember, and I'm just repeating a story. Somewhere my kids' eyes are rolling because I am the queen of the repetition of stories. So it really bugs them. But they're not here, so I can tell you again. And maybe you won't roll your eyes. So this story is a beautiful one. In my therapy office, anytime a child or a teenager or an adult comes, I tell them this for the first time, their first visit. I say to them, okay, do you know how when you go to the dentist, or when you were a kid and you went to the dentist, if you sit still on the chair and you don't bite the dentist, and you don't wiggle around, and you don't shout or close your mouth tight and not let him work on you, he says to you, when you're finished, you can come to this cardboard box and open it, and you can take a prize home. And they all nod, and they're looking around like, where are your toys? What are you going to send me with? And I say, well, it's not like that here. And then I pick up a marble and I say, this is for you. And this is to remind you that you get to come to my office just as you are. In fact, I prefer it. If you're angry, you get to come angry. If you're afraid, you get to come afraid. If you're sad, you get to come sad. If you feel like knocking everything off the shelves and running around the room, you get to come like that. You get to be here in my presence as you are, and I will be with you. And this is to remind you that you are loved just as you are, that there's not one thing you can do to get more love, and there's not one thing that you can do to have it taken away. Some of them get it, the little ones. The adults always do. But the kiddos who get it the most are the ones who are in my office because they've been written up at school for blurting out in class, for having fights with friends, for shouting, for not paying attention. And their moms have been getting notes home over and over and over. And finally the moms are like, I think something's wrong with my kid. Let's bring them in so you can work with them. And those kids, when I say that, their body physically relaxes. They may not have a consciousness of it, but their whole entire being just, oh. And then they come every week. And if I forget to bring down the marbles, they're like, where's my marble? One time, there was a kiddo that came, and I had given that spiel, and this particular day, they grabbed their marble and they ran out in the waiting room, and their mom was next door getting a brain training. And in the brain training rooms, much like the dentist, they need marbles for a different reason. They need gifts to help kids be still and do the training. And so this kiddo ran in that room, and the practitioner thought that the kiddo had taken one of her marbles. And he runs back out. So she chases him out into the waiting room, and she says, that marble, because they'd been wanting him to do brain training, and she says, that marble is for behaving, doing well in my office. And he said, well, first of all, Angie gave me this marble, and I was in my office, door closed, I could hear this. And she said, well, I'm sure Miss Angie wants you to behave in order to get a marble. And I heard him out in the hall say, no. Angie said, it's because I'm loved just the way I am. And I was in my office going, oh, he got it. He got it. And what's crazy is when that kiddo is allowed to come in every week just the way he is, and I get really close to the things that are scary and hard, the things he's trying to avoid deep inside, the place where he believes lies about himself and about God and about the world. Every week, my presence is really there, connecting and staying connected, even when it's hard, even when his behaviors are pushing me away or her behaviors are pushing me away. And over time, there's a shift. Over time, the child begins to breathe. Over time, the child gets freed to feel what they feel. And over time, they begin to love. First, they know that the living water has come in and loved them. Then they pour it out, because that's the other part of that story. As Jesus said, I will be in you as a stream of living water flowing out. It's like Peter preached or prayed earlier. Preached or prayed, I don't know. Prayed earlier that it's so that we would be a blessing to the world. And when the living water takes over our hearts, we begin to see people aright. It kind of ends up being like, I was talking to one person that I was talking with in my office, an adult, about this, and we're talking about how important it is to be angry for a while, to be like, no, like kind of like you want to do with the Pharisees, no, get out of here, right? It's important, it's an important part. But what ends up happening as the water of life transforms you is when someone is like that, you're able to say, I see that you're hurting. I see that you've lost sight of the fact that you're loved. We don't take it personally anymore. I'm not there yet, by the way, sometimes. But that's how you can see this transformation of these parts in you, is that you don't have to defend anymore. You can speak up for those that are oppressed, for those that are hurting, for the woman on the ground. You can speak up for them. But a lot of times you will give them love. It will be between you and them, and they will take in the living water. So, I forgot to tell you this really cool story, and it goes with the communion. The reason that I first thought about the living water with this story, so I just read the part with the woman, and as I was reading it, something came to me. As she was laying on the ground, I was reading, and I thought, I was thinking of this song that my dad used to sing a lot. And actually, there was this album. Did anyone ever listen to the Hawaiians when they were little? No, no. Oh, I'm sorry. Anyway, they sang this song, and so we heard the album a lot. And I thought of this line in it that says, it's ho everyone that is thirsty in spirit. And there's a line in it where it says, nothing but fullness your longing can bring. So I called my dad to find out more about the song because I couldn't remember, and we talked for a while on FaceTime. My dad and mom are people who love the appearing of Jesus. And my dad said to me, he got tears in his eyes as I was about to get off the phone, and he said, Angie, when you go to communion, are you going to sing a line from that song? And then through tears, he sang it to me. And I said, yes, I am, Dad. Yes, I am. So let's see if I can do it. First, Jesus took the bread and he broke it. And he said, this is my body given for you. Whenever you eat it, do it in remembrance of me. And in the same way, he took the cup and maybe he said something like this. Ho, everyone that is thirsty in spirit. Ho, everyone that is weary and sad. Come to the fountain, there's fullness in Jesus. All that you're longing for, come and be glad. I will pour water on her that is thirsty. I will pour floods upon the dry ground. Open your heart for the gifts I am bringing. While you are seeking me, I will be found. And then the verse that has the special line, child of the kingdom, be filled with the Spirit. Nothing but fullness your longing can bring. 'Tis the imbuement for life and for service. Thine is the promise, so certain, so sweet. I will pour water on her that is thirsty. I will pour floods upon the dry ground. Open your heart for the gifts I am bringing. While you are seeking me, I will be found. It's important to know that if you're seeking him, it's because he's called you. Like Aslan says, you would not have looked for me had I not been calling to you. So don't worry, he's going to find you. So come forward, open your hearts for the gifts. And another gift, we're going to have marbles, and I'm going to sit right there and welcome you to, after you take the bread and the wine, to come and get a marble again. One of you told me that you carry your marble from the last sermon everywhere with you, and I cannot tell you what that means to me. I didn't ask permission from you to say anything about it today, so I'm just saying you, but you know who you are. And it meant so much to me that you carry that reminder with you everywhere you go. So, come forward. Dark cups are wine, light cups are juice. Okay, just want to say one more thing and then bless you and then get you out to lunch. I'm not here because there's a Super Bowl to watch. But just to be clear, we're not doing it. That woman was exactly where she was meant to be. She had gone through all the things in her life that were exactly what she had to go through. And she was in the place where she had to be. The Pharisees were exactly where they were meant to be. They had to go through all the things in their life that brought them to this place where they pushed him away. They had to be there so that they would know the grace that is so powerful and the water that is so full. There's no other way. And so I want to bless you today by saying, today, look into the eyes of love and see that you belong. And when you do, something's going to crack open in you. And then I bless you to be vessel of the living water to everyone you bump into, until you have to come back to his feet again and go, oh, I forgot. And that's okay. Bless you.